You know, when you see a fly buzzing around, what's your first instinct? Probably to swat it away, right? Most of us do. But what if I told you that very same creature holds the key to fighting some of our biggest medical challenges? We're talking about everything from antibiotic resistance to chronic disease. So let's take a closer look at the fly that could, quite literally, save us.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. A maggot? Really? It's a bit of a strange question. But the larva of the black soldier fly, well, it's basically a wriggling powerhouse of therapeutic compounds. And these compounds could totally revolutionize medicine, giving us a brand new weapon in the absolutely critical fight against superbugs.
All right, let's dive in and meet our unlikely medical hero. And just to be clear, we're not really talking about the adult fly you see buzzing around. We're interested in its larval stage. That's where all the magic happens. And trust me, it's a kind of magic we desperately need to deal with a huge global crisis.
And every hero needs a villain, right? Well, in this story, the villain is a big one. Antimicrobial resistance, or AMR for short. You've probably heard of them as superbugs. These are bacteria and other germs that have evolved to the point where our current antibiotics just don't work on them anymore. This puts us in a really dangerous spot and creates an urgent need for brand new weapons in our medical arsenal. So what's the larva's secret? What does this little guy have that we need so badly? It all comes down to something called antimicrobial peptides, or AMPs. You can think of these as the larva's own personal built-in defense system. And it just so happens that this incredibly powerful natural defense system is exactly what we've been searching for. Now, it's not just one thing. The larva's power comes from a really sophisticated three-part arsenal that it uses to just obliterate pathogens. It's like a coordinated attack, using peptides, fats, and even its own exoskeleton. So let's break down these incredible natural weapons one by one. So we're going to look at three things. First, the peptides, which are kind of like the frontline shock troops. Then the fats, which act like a biological detergent. And finally, a unique polymer that provides another line of attack. Let's start with those peptides. Now, here's what makes these peptides so special. Think about a normal antibiotic. It's like a very specific key that has to find and fit one single lock inside a bacteria's machinery to work. But bacteria are clever. Over time, they can just change the lock. The BCF peptides, they don't care about keys or locks. They're more like a battering ram. They physically smash through the bacteria's outer wall, ripping it to shreds. It's a brute force attack that is so much harder for bacteria to evolve a defense against. And get this, it's not just one magic bullet. The larva is like a little chemical factory, pumping out a whole cocktail of these different compounds. I mean, just look at this table. You've got AMPs like CLP1 that target a huge range of microbes by just destroying their membranes. But then you also have other things like lauric acid and chitosan, which use totally different methods to attack different germs. It's this multi-pronged attack that makes it so ridiculously effective. Okay, on to weapon number 2, fats. Specifically, something called lauric acid. And this chart just shows you how dominant it is. The oil from these larvae can be packed with it, up to 76% lauric acid. It basically acts like a biological detergent, dissolving the protective membranes around microbes, which is especially tough on things like the fungus Candida albicans. And for the final piece of this amazing three-part arsenal, we have a polymer called chitosan. And this one is really cool because it's not something the larva makes to fight germs, it's literally part of its own body. It's derived from that tough exoskeleton it sheds as it grows. So how does a piece of its old skin fight germs? Well, it comes down to basic physics, really. It's all about electrical charge. Chitosan has a positive charge. Microbes, on the other hand, have a negative charge. It's like a magnet. You know what happens next? They get pulled together, and that interaction is enough to bust open the microbe's defenses. Game over. On top of that, it's biocompatible with us, so it can be used in stuff like wound dressings to both fight infection and help our own tissues heal. Okay, so killing germs directly? That's amazing. But hold on, because this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. It turns out these compounds don't just attack invaders. They can actually interact with and calm down our own immune systems when they get out of control. And this is a huge deal. So many diseases, everything from colitis to heart disease, are driven by chronic, runaway inflammation. What researchers found is that BSF oil can step in and directly suppress that dangerous inflammatory response right inside our own cells. So, how on earth does it do that? Let's simplify a super complex process. Inside your cells, there's like a big red inflammation alarm button. When a threat comes along, like a nasty pathogen, it pushes that button. This kicks off a chain reaction, a master inflammation pathway called NF-kappa B. Now here's where the BSF oil gets really clever. Instead of trying to deal with the chaos after the alarm is already blaring, it goes upstream. It finds the wires leading to that alarm button, these little molecular switches called CK2 and ERK, and it just cuts them. And by cutting those wires, the final go signal for that massive, damaging inflammatory response, it just never gets sent. The entire process gets stopped dead in its tracks before it can cause a problem. And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. This chart says it all. Researchers looked at these key molecules that drive inflammation, called TNF-alpha and IL-6. Before they added the BSF oil, you can see the levels are through the roof. After, a huge, significant drop. That's hard evidence of its anti-inflammatory power. Okay, so the science is mind-blowing, right? But the big question is, how do we get these amazing compounds from a wriggling larva into your local pharmacy? That journey from lab to reality, well, it has some pretty big hurdles we need to clear first. For starters, there are safety questions. Some people with shellfish allergies might also react to BSF proteins. Then there's stability. Those powerful peptides can be a little fragile in our bodies. And then you hit the big ones, regulation and cost. Getting something approved for human use by the FDA is a monumental and expensive task. And to do that, you need extreme purity, which means you can't just feed these larvae cheap waste anymore. You need a highly controlled, very expensive process. So with all those challenges, what's the game plan? Well, it's actually a really smart step-by-step approach. You start small. In the next few years, you'll probably see BSF compounds show up in lower-risk things like topical creams or wound dressings. In the medium term, maybe oral supplements to help with inflammation. And then, the long-term holy grail, 10+ years down the line, fully approved injectable antibiotics to fight the absolute toughest superbugs out there. And this quote from the researchers just nails the whole strategy. You use the money from the easier-to-approve products, like skincare, to fund the incredibly expensive, decade-long research needed to develop those life-saving injectable drugs. It's a practical, logical way to get there. So we end where we began, looking at this simple fly. It's so easy to dismiss, isn't it? But as we've seen, it's not just a pest. It's a tiny, living bioreactor, a pharmacy full of compounds that could fight infection, calm inflammation, and heal wounds. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the solutions to our biggest problems come from the most unexpected places. So I'll ask you again, the next time you see a fly, will you see a pest or a pharmacy?